So welcome. So want to look at section A of the Science Paper 2 2025 GCE, that's August. So I'll look at a few multiple choice so that you can see how you would have answered them. So let's right away go into the questions. It says a learner accidentally sucks into the mouth a solution of sodium hydroxide during titration. Choose the appropriate action a learner should take. So remember, sodium hydroxide is actually an alkaline solution, and therefore when a student accidentally, they need to spit it out and actually wash with plenty of water in their mouth, and they'll be okay. So D was actually the best option. Spit out the solution and thoroughly rinse the mouth with the water. Which state or states of matter exist at the boiling point of a liquid? Now, if you remember, at the boiling point of a liquid, for example, if you have something like that, if that's a solid, that's a liquid, and that's a gas. So at the boiling point, somewhere here, this is what we call the boiling point. There's a mixture of a liquid and a gas only. So you're going to have a liquid and a gas. So C was actually the correct one. Then what about at the melting point? So at the melting point, there are two states, the solid and liquid. So that is what you need to remember. A3 says the diagram shows changes of state among the three states of matter. So you can see that. Why are these changes called physical changes rather than chemical changes? This is because they produce no new substance. So when a physical change takes place, it simply means that no new substance is actually produced. So D was the correct option there. Then which of the following, that's A4, which of the following is the best method used to separate sugar crystals from sugar solution during production of sugar? So basically we use what we call crystallization, because you want crystals to be forming from the solution. Therefore, crystallization is the best process. F5 says a learner accidentally mixed iodine crystals with magnesium chloride. Which method would be suitable to separate this mixture? Remember that iodine crystals actually undergo, they sublime, meaning they can change direct from solid and change to gas, so they can easily be separated by sublimation. So sublimation is actually the best process. Then S6 says which of the following is the approximate mass in atomic mass unit for an electron? So remember, the approximate is simply 1 over 1840. That is for an electron. That is the atomic mass unit that they wanted you to get there. So this is simply the atomic mass unit. So the atomic mass unit. So like I said, F5, because iodine undergoes sublimation, it can change directly from solid to gas without passing through a liquid. Sublimation becomes the correct process. Then in terms of the approximate mass in atomic mass unit for electron, it is simply 1 over 1840. So that's what you need to remember. Let's go on and try to see how we would have answered the other questions there. So A7 says the following diagram shows the structure of an atom for element W. Choose the chemical formula of the compound formed when W reacts with oxygen. So if you notice, it has one electron in the outermost shell. It simply means that it has a valence of 1. Then for oxygen, it is in group 6, hence it has a valence of, all those elements in group 6 have a valence of 2. So when you exchange the valences, you swap the valences, you are going to have W2 then O. So if you notice there, what we're having there, C is the best option. A8 says hydrochloric acid is used to clean some metals. The acid reacts with the oxide layer. So the acid reacts with the oxide layer on the surface of the metal. Which of the following are the products formed? So remember, when an acid reacts with a metal oxide, what happens is that it produces a salt and also H2O. So which of the following are the products formed? So it is simply salt and water. D was the correct one. The results, A9 says the result of 3 tests carried out on a solution of compound M are shown in the table. So there's a test and there are results that are there. So there's aqueous sodium hydroxide added, a white PPT formed, which is soluble in excess. Aqueous ammonia when added, white PPT formed but soluble in excess. Then hydrochloric acid added, then effervescence of a gas that turns lime water milky observed. What is compound M? Well, because you are able to see effervescence and lime water turns milky, it simply means that carbon dioxide was produced. So meaning, such a compound should contain a carbonate, should actually contain a carbonate. Now, the one that produces a white precipitate, which is soluble in excess, is simply zinc. So it should have actually been zinc carbonate there. So that's the correct one. So please go through under your analysis, your qualitative analysis notes, and actually look at that. It will actually help you. Then it says that 2.4 grams of magnesium ribbon 2.4 grams of magnesium ribbons was reacted with 100 cubic centimeter of 2 molar dilute sulfuric acid. What is the volume of the gas produced at room temperature and pressure? So remember, it was talking about magnesium reacting with the dilute sulfuric acid. So dilute sulfuric acid, when they react, what will be produced is magnesium sulfate, but also you expect to have hydrogen gas. So now remember, they have told us in this case reacted with this volume and that concentration of dilute sulfuric acid. What volume of the gas produced at RTP? So now in this case, you need to know which one is the limiting reagent. So you can simply calculate the number of moles there. So number of moles is equal to concentration times volume. So when you look at the concentration, it is 2. The volume, that volume they have given us of 100, we are going to divide it by 1000, which will give us 0.1, so that we change to cubic decimeter. So multiply by 0.1 cubic decimeter, and that will give us 0.2 moles. And if you look at that one, 2.4, we can also find the number of moles that are found in this one. Number of moles is will be equal to the mass divided by the mixture. So the mass is 2.4, then the mixture of magnesium is 24, and hence when you look at that, it will give us, that will be 2.4 divided by 24. That will simply give us 0.1 mole. So because the mole ratio is 1:1 from the balanced chemical equation, it means magnesium was the limiting reagent. So what you do is that to find the volume of the gas produced at room temperature, you're just going to say the total mass of magnesium from the balanced is simply 24 grams. So 24 grams, you equate it to 24 cubic decimeter, that is of hydrogen at RTP. So you just say now, suppose I've got 2.4 grams, then what volume will that give me? We don't know, we cross multiply. If you cross multiply, this will give me 24x is equal to 2.4 times 24. Then I'll divide 24. I'll also do it the other side. You can notice that that will still give you 2.4 cubic decimeter. So 2.4 cubic decimeter was the best option there. Then A11 says that calcium carbonate thermally decomposes to form calcium oxide and carbon dioxide according to the equation. So that's the equation. So they have actually given us calcium carbonate. It decomposes into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So 8.0 grams of calcium carbonate was strongly heated in a crucible, and 3.4 grams of calcium oxide remained in the crucible. So it actually remained in the crucible. Then what was the percentage yield of calcium oxide? So remember, this they have given you is what we are calling as being the actual, that is the actual yield. So you need to find what we call as being the theoretical yield. So how do you do that? You need to find the mixture of calcium carbonate. If you find the mixture of calcium carbonate, I believe it's 100, it's 3 times 16, which will give you 48. Carbon there is 1 times 12, which will give you 12. and calcium there is 1 times 40, which will give you 40. So when you add that, it will give you 100. You also need to find the mist of calcium oxide. There's 1 times 16, which is 16, and 1 times 40, which will give you 40. When you add that, it will give you 56. So from the balanced chemical equation, you can say 100 grams of calcium carbonate produces 56 grams of calcium oxide. So you're going to say, what about if I have 8.0 grams, then what mass of calcium oxide will that give me? We don't know, so x, so you can cross multiply. So when you find x, this times that will give me 100x is equal to 8.0 times 56, then divide by 100. What I do this side, I'll do it the other side. So x will be equal to, if you put that one, it will be 8 multiplied by 56. Whatever we get, we divide it by 100. It is simply giving me, 4.48 grams, which is approximately the same as 4.5 grams. Now, once you get that one, you can now find the percentage yield. Remember, percentage yield is equal to, let me just get some space there. So percentage yield is equal to, the actual yield over the theoretical yield times 100. So if you notice, the actual yield we got is simply 3.4. The theoretical yield that I got is simply 4.5, then times 100. So when you put that on the calculator, 3.4 divided by 4.5 divided by 100. So what is that going to give me? So sorry, 3.4 divided by 4.5, then times 100. It is simply giving me 75.5, 5. So that is 76%. And if you notice there, from the solution that they have given us there, 76A was actually the best option that you needed to do there. Hopefully we are still together. Then 812 says that hydrogen peroxide solution decomposes very slowly at room temperature to produce oxygen and water. Apart from increasing the temperature, suggests the best way the reaction can be speeded up. So remember, hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, when broken down, it produces H2O water plus also oxygen. So the only way is by actually using a suitable catalyst, and in most cases we use manganese oxide. So that's the one that we actually use, manganese oxide, as a catalyst to help speed up this reaction. The diagram shows, that's A13, the diagram shows the electronic structure of an ion of element L. To which group and period of the periodic table does element L belong? So because it has given out 3 electrons, meaning that it had 3 electrons in the outermost shell, meaning it is in group 3. And since there are 2 shells there, and it gave out 3, meaning there was a 3rd shell, it simply means it is simply in group 3 and period 3. That's what it indicated there. Which A14, which is the electronic configuration of a noble gas used to provide an inert atmosphere in welding? Normally, an inert atmosphere, if you go to your periodic table, if you go to your periodic table, an element that is used for that, let me just try to see if I have a periodic table here. So the one that is actually used there, we actually use argon. So argon is actually used, and it has proton number 18. So if you write the electronic configuration, it will be 2,8,8, and therefore B was the correct option. So this is the element argon that is used to provide an inert atmosphere. A15 says metal Y was added to iron 2 sulfate solution, and the solution changed from green to colorless. What is the identity of metal Y? Now if you look at this one, in order for this metal Y to react with iron sulfate and the color changes, it simply means this metal was actually more reactive more reactive than the iron. That's why it was displaced. So if you compare here, if you go back at your reactivity series, Kelvin, Natasha, can marry all Zambian females, since provided he could do all agree in this case. You notice that silver, gold, and copper. Yeah, so you notice that silver, gold, and copper are all below iron. They are below iron, so they cannot displace iron. So because magnesium is above iron, it simply means magnesium is actually the best option there. It was able to displace to produce that colorless solution. Hopefully you are getting the sense of what we are doing there. The diagram shows the main stages in the manufacture of ammonia-based fertilizer. What is happening in the process labeled Y? So the process labeled Y shows an arrow going back. This is unreacted hydrogen and nitrogen being recycled. That's what you need to remember. A17 says methane is reacted with steam in the presence of nickel catalyst to produce gas T and carbon dioxide. What is a suitable method of collecting gas T and the reason? That's what they mean there. So now it says methane is reacted when reacted with the steam in the presence of a nickel catalyst produces gas T and carbon dioxide. So they are talking about CF when reacted with steam, in this case H2O, it actually produces carbon dioxide. The other gas that it actually produces is actually hydrogen. So you can use what we are calling the upward delivery because it is actually less dense than water. I think that's the method that you can use. Pollutant gases are released by the bacterial decay in vegetable matter. Which gas is mainly sourced from the decay of vegetable oil? So it's mainly the gas called methane. Then A19 says butene can undergo an addition reaction with steam to form compound R. So when it undergoes, because it is butene, it simply means that it will form an alcohol called butanol. That's what we know. Remember, all alkenes undergo an addition reaction with steam called hydration reaction to produce an alcohol. So that's what you needed to remember there. All right, let's go to our last one there. It says polymers are made using monomers. The following are structures of some monomers. So they have given us some monomers. If you study them carefully there, identify the correct set of monomers that form a polyamide. Now, a polyamide is one that contains an amide linkage. And when you look at an amide linkage, it may actually look something like this. So this is what we call as being an amide linkage. So among these, which one actually produces an amide linkage? So to produce an amide linkage, you need what we call as being a carboxylic acid. In fact, it's a dicarboxylic acid, and you also need a D-amine, something that contains the amine functional group, which is simply Y and Z. So it contains this, and there's also a carboxyl. So when these two combine, they'll be able to create that. So the best option there was A. Hopefully you enjoyed. Please, if you love what we do, you can subscribe to our channel and share. Please watch out as we finish the rest of the questioning. So